Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for joining us for the September edition of the Lunch and Learn. My name is Heather McGaffin, and I'm the director of the Office of Unified Communications, the city's 911 and 311 center here in Washington, D.C. Today, I want to spend a little bit of time walking you through our new 911 performance dashboard. This dashboard is in compliance with legislation enacted in August of 2023 to show the performance of the Office of Unified Communication. This is a beta dashboard. You may have seen an iteration that was debuted on our website on Friday. We received several pieces of informative feedback that helped us to ameliorate the dashboard and relaunched on Monday morning. We will continue through that process to ensure that this performance dashboard is transparent, helpful, and easy to navigate. So again, thank you for spending a little bit of time with me this afternoon as we walk through the 911 performance dashboard. If you have questions, you can enter those into our Q&A and know that this session is being recorded, and a link to that recording will be posted here permanently on the dashboard's website homepage for ease of use and reference as you move forward. As I mentioned, this is a beta site, and we're always working to improve the site and what we're providing you as the public. You can provide feedback about the site here under the feedback on the site here link. You can also provide feedback on a specific 911 or 311 call or text using this second link. Visit our feedback form. Our feedback form was launched in March of 2023 and allows for our residents and visitors visiting Washington, D.C. to report back on any issues that they had while calling 911 or 311 or interacting with our staff. You can also provide positive feedback. Sometimes in the thankless job of being a 911 or 311 call taker, it is nice for us to be able to share great interactions to help motivate our employees. The 911 Center in Washington, D.C. is one of the busiest. This year, we have handled approximately 1.27 million 911 calls for service. In 2022, we handled 1.6 million. In July of this year, OUC answered 75.98% of calls in 15 seconds or less. And in August of 23, that number jumped to 81% in 15 seconds or less. Now, where does this 15 seconds or less number come from? It comes from the 911 call processing standard from NENA. NENA is the National Emergency Number Association and provides standards and best practices for the 6,000 911 centers across the nation. This number was established many years ago and is looked at continuously through different various means in hopes that as the number of calls that are coming into 911 centers, this number could sometimes change. The other thing I would like to point you to is the OUC roadmap. Some of you may be familiar with an audit that was done of the 911 center here several years ago. Through that audit, several recommendations were made, and the OUC roadmap provided some recommendations and actions to meet those recommendations. By clicking on the link, you are taken to this site, which shows you how we are faring in implementing recommendations and how we are faring in the actions that we are doing. There's also an operations roadmap that is updated monthly, and it shows the progress on each individual recommendation, the actions we're taking, the current status, and the progress. As I navigate back, you can be assured that this website can be accessed both on desktop and your mobile phone. We also will have this link to becoming a 911 call taker or dispatcher. We are always hiring here at the Office of Communications. If this is of Unified Communications, if this is something that you would like to do, click on this link to learn more. Now, moving on to the 911 performance highlights. This infographic shows simply how many calls we took in 2022, the average answer time, which was 7.58 seconds, how those calls fared between MPD events dispatched and FEMS events dispatched, As you can see, those two numbers added together do not equal the 1.6 million calls that we took. That's because of the several diversion programs that we have here at the Office of Unified Communications, as well as calls that were made to 911 that may not have been for an emergency situation. Out of the 74,434 calls that connected to 911, but then were disconnected, we are calling back everyone, and that is through an automated callback system. Here at OUC, we are also exploring options that are now available to PSAPs to, instead of make a voice callback, to make a text callback. In 2022, we also engaged in over 6,000 text to 911 sessions and 502 TTY sessions. The percentage of calls from call to queue in 90 seconds or less was 63.9. The percentage of calls answered within 10 seconds was 51.4. And the percentage of calls from queue to dispatch in 60 seconds or less was 47.6. Those numbers are also here. Now, let's talk a little bit about the anatomy of a 911 call. There are several parts to a 911 call, and those numbers are shown below this graphic, but I just want to take a minute and step through this. When you originally call 911, the call to answer is the time between the time your call was delivered by your telephone company to our 911 center until someone picks up and says, DC 911, what is the address of your emergency? The call processing time is the amount of time that it takes for the call taker to gather the information and decide about the necessary response. This is the time that you are engaged in a conversation with the call taker. The call to dispatch queue is the time between when the call is answered by the call taker until the dispatcher receives the incident to dispatch. Here at OUC, we run a horizontal center, which means that the person who is taking the call and interacting with you is not the person dispatching the call to police and/or fire. The dispatch to en route time is the time when the dispatcher first receives the call until the time they dispatch the units. The en route to arrival time is the travel time from when a unit initially starts en route to when they arrive on scene. Moving down to the performance dashboard, the 911 call handling data. This data below measures what we refer to as call to answer. That's the time between the time the 911 call is delivered and the time that the call taker initially answers the call with those words, DC 911, what is the address of an emergency? The start dates and the end dates are defaulted to 9/1 of 23 to 9/10 of 23. However, you can toggle down and change those dates starting from July 1st. Our incoming call volume is shown daily. The number of calls that we answered is shown daily. Now, the delta between these are the abandoned calls. Abandoned calls are calls that are disconnected by the caller or dropped by the telephone service provider prior to someone answering 911. What's the address of your emergency? 911 centers do not abandon calls. Callers and initiators or cell phone service providers are where a call is abandoned. The percentage of 911 calls answered in 15 seconds or less is calculated daily in these numbers that you see. The number of 911 calls answered in 15 seconds or less is then denoted here. The number of calls answered greater than 15 seconds is denoted here daily. And the number of 911 caller hangups or abandoned after 15 seconds is listed here. The delta between the caller hangups after 15 seconds and the delta here is typically because of pocket dials or situations where holding a button down too long or asking Siri or Google Assistants or being in conversation where those technologies pick up the command to dial 911. It doesn't just have to be 911 on those devices. Those devices are international and various places have different methodology to reach emergency services. So 991 or 111 will also activate 911 in your phone in the United States. The average answer time for calls is also listed for each state. This data comes directly from our telephony software, which is guided by standards and principles from the FCC and the national organizations, NENA, the National Emergency Number Association, and APCO, the Association for Public Safety Communications Officials. As we move down to the 911 dispatch data, this data measures how the time between when the call is answered by the call taker until the dispatcher receives the initial dispatch. Those are broken down again by dates and by agencies. Priorities for calls are set by the agencies that we send calls to. So DC Fire and EMS and MPD. As you can see here, there's priorities 1, 2, and 3, and then the average call to dispatch queue. This is for any date range that you select. If you would just like to look at one date, all you need to do is click on the date and then the next day, and it will provide you with all of the information for the start date. If you click on just the date, it'll give you some information, but to be inclusive of all times, click on the next day. We then drop down to the 911 call diversion data. Not all calls require a dispatch for DC Fire and EMS or the Metropolitan Police Department. Currently, the 911 Center in Washington, D.C. participates in a number of diversion programs. This data below shows where they were diverted to based on the date. We have the Department of Behavioral Health Access Helpline for mental health emergencies, the DDOT motor vehicle collision where there are no injuries, and the Fire and EMS nurse triage line. After we talk to the caller on the 911 line and identify what the situation is, we are then able to successfully transfer them to the more appropriate assistance. Those numbers are reflected here. These numbers are calculated again using the drop-down menus. The 911 shift staffing data shows the total number of shifts and the number of those shifts where we did not meet our target staffing level. This data is updated monthly. And so as you can see, in July of 2023, there was a total of 67 shifts. Now, how is that possible? Here at the Office of Unified Communications, Monday through Saturday, we operate 2 12-hour shifts, 6 a.m. to 6:30 p.m. and 6 p.m. to 6:30 a.m. The extra half an hour allows for our call takers and dispatchers to participate in roll call trainings, situational awareness, and allows for our call takers and dispatchers to do a one-to-one trade-off during shift changes, which means as people are not logging out until others are logged in to take over that radio to ensure a continuity of operations. Therefore, depending on the number of Sundays that are in a shift and the number of days in a month, the bottom number for the total of shifts will change. In August of 2023, 26 of our 66 shifts were not filled to the target staffing needs. In July of 23, 22 of 67 were not filled. 911 call misuse data. This is the data that we are reporting to show how many calls each day or month that we received that did not require a public safety response or need to be diverted. These calls were either sent to 311 for non-emergency city services or were disconnected from the caller, giving them advice on when it's appropriate to call 911 in the future and when it's more appropriate to call 311. The next section is our 911 concerns. These are concerns reported to or discovered by OUC, why an issue occurred, and how we took corrective action to minimize the chances of the issues reoccurring. If you believe there was an issue reported and you do not see it below, again, I would encourage you to submit that feedback here on this link. This will take you to our feedback form where you can fill out the information and send it to our center. We ask for a name, a contact information, email, and phone number, a language that you would like to be communicated with, and what the information was. Within 24 hours or the next business day, someone from our office will get back to you. As we look at the concerns, Please note that these are also reported monthly, updated at the end of the month. We have the reporter who's reporting the incident, whether it involves FEMS or MPD, if it was another agency, or if it involves OUC directly. As you can see here, you can also decide how you would like to parse that information out and what agencies are involved. Below, you'll find a comprehensive table of the date, who it was reported by, what the concern was, what the finding was, whether it was sustained, and any actions taken. As you scroll down, you'll be able to see, if there were leave restrictions in place because of call volume, if we had staffing increases, if we followed up to seek further information, if an employee was disciplined or referred to OPSD, which is our Office of Professional Standards and Development. Here in Washington, D.C., we are required to follow the DPM, the district's personnel manual. We also follow that for discipline, and we also follow that for personnel issues. So now that we have walked through this, we certainly know that there are things that the public is interested in, and we will be adding those to our dashboard. I would like to note that we are working with our partners, both on the executive level and the legislative side, to ameliorate this, to accept feedback, and to ensure that we are compliant with all legislative requirements here at the Office of Unified Communications. Our website is a great resource, not just now because of the performance tab, but also for a lot of different reasons. We have a lot of programming that is going on, including our Junior Academy, our Citizen Engagement Academy, as well as the ability for us to come out and talk with your local community groups or organizations about 911. I would like to take this time to thank each and every one of you for joining today. Please check back often, as you'll be seeing more updates to our dashboard, and I hope that you have a great day. Thank you for joining us here, and be safe.